What is necessary for 21st century teachers and learners? There are many concepts that teachers need to take into consideration to create a 21st century classroom for students to be successful learners. Have you ever thought about all of the possibilities? Let's discuss a few for you to be able to create the most successful 21st century classroom possible. Okay, so the flipped classroom approach. This is referring to Bloom's taxonomy, but flipped. It is believed in the 21st century, classrooms for the learning process for students will be easier and more student-based with the model flipped upside down. By flipping this model, the student starts with the basic exposure to new materials, then they are able to explore and be creative. They also suggest by using the flip model, they are then expanding their learning using ICT processes by further exploring how it works, then developing a final understanding of the principles. This approach enhances the 21st century learning paradigm, as students' learning processes and principles are relevant to their lives and the world today. This then leads them to having experience and knowledge in areas that after school allows them to be successful. The engagement approach. In recent years, this has become a dominant approach in the classroom. This is stating that the teacher needs to meet the needs of a student for them to be able to engage in the learning process. The classroom environment for the brain to be engaged in learning needs provides students with the social and intellectual learning opportunities. For students to really engage in learning, the classroom environment needs to provide a place where they feel safe physically and emotionally. So what does the brain do? The brain is the only organ in the human body that is not fully developed at birth. It adapts to the learning processes, which is influenced by the learning environment the child is exposed to. In childhood years, the brain is highly plastic. This impacts the learning and teaching as the brain is influenced by the learning process in the classroom environment. The idea of the brain being engaged is when the learning is occurring for the brain to place pieces of information together to develop a concept, an understanding, or some sort of skill. Social emotional learning. Students who have their social emotional needs invested into their learning experiences are engaged in the learning process. Part of the 21st century teaching is to make the learning real. This encourages students to participate in the learning as it will contribute something to their lives. Students need to be socially, emotionally stable to learn, to make the learning processes successful. Focusing on someone's strengths makes individuals think positive towards a learning experience, as it is something they know they can achieve. Learning social and emotional skills in the classroom allows for success in school and in life. When participating in learning in the classroom and being engaged in the social emotional skills they use include self-management, social awareness, and being engaged, and relationship skills, responsible decision-making, and self-awareness. Children are motivated to learn if their interests or strengths are focused on the learning experience. As educators, teaching students to learn, we need to incorporate and promote social emotional learning in our everyday classroom experiences. Make the learning real and relevant. As educators today, we need to incorporate differentiation theory. This is based around no two children are the same. Everyone learns differently, and students need to be encouraged to think for themselves. Then there's blended learning. This approach is of mixed teaching methods and ways of learning, mixing face-to-face learning with e-learning and new technologies. Constructivism. Everything a person learns is mediated by their prior experiences and understanding. This means that people build their own knowledge and understanding, and they do not simply absorb what they are taught. Connectivism. An overview that connectivism is a learning theory that explains how internet technologies have created new opportunities for people to learn and share information across the World Wide Web and among themselves, connecting their worlds and what they're doing at home into the classroom and the other way around. Students are guides of their own learning. They direct what is being learned from their strengths and interests, topics that are real and relevant again to their lives. So when we think about all these concepts, how do we answer what is 21st century learning? 21st century learning is how teachers need to educate their students on what they need to learn in ways that follows our pedagogy today. The P21 document states the following as framework outcome areas for 21st century learning: content knowledge and 21st century themes, learning and innovation skills, information, media and technology skills, life and career skills. The implications that learning is student-based, using the strengths and interests of students to make the learning process real and relevant, using technology as an everyday tool to communicate, research and present information, and incorporating social emotional learning into the learning process. So how would I create a 21st century classroom for my students? This would be through many ways, although I believe in staying up to date with pedagogies. Still being willing to learn myself, encouraging open communication in the classroom for self-regulation, and for the students in my classroom to be problem solvers and researchers, to enable them to produce their own learning through projects and integrating using many KLAs. I really enjoyed reading 27 Ways to be Better 21st Century Teachers. 3 ideas that I liked the most out of this article were to make the students' learning real, make it for them to be able to ask questions, and for them to be able to relate to the material.
Thank you, Tearne. My turn. So if one's defining 21st century learning or incorporates ICT, how do we as educators integrate it into the learning today? Are you as a teacher up to date with the ways of technology? Tools of ICT. We know that technology is changing rapidly. Newer, more cost-effective and more powerful technologies will continue to be used in education. However, we know that, once in schools, technology is used for the life of the product, whether or not newer, more cost-effective and or more powerful technologies are created. New technology and updates are then ignored. In addition to this, we often associate ICT with internet connection. The internet is not widely available in all areas of Australia and the rest of the developing world. Broadcast technologies such as radio and television have a much greater influence than the internet throughout much of the developing world. This significant gap is not envisioned to be closed anytime soon. The I generation. Not many people fit into a defined generation. Their core, work and personal values may differ. Generally, persons born between 1946 and 1964 belong to the baby boomer generation. People born before 1946 are often called the traditional or silent generation. There is a good agreement that people born between 1965 and 1979 are called the X generation. Then came the 1980s and the birth of the World Wide Web, which brought the power of cyberspace to the masses. The most common label is Generation Y, with an obvious reference to being the generation after X. Others who stretch the generation past 1999 and into the next decade often refer to them as the millennials. The rapid change in technology now means we have a new label and generation, the I generation, with I representing all the types of mobile technologies being purchased and by children and adolescents. For example, the iPhone, the iPod, Wii, iTunes. These technologies are purpose-built mostly for the individual use. However, this new generation may seem to encompass those children and teens born in the new millennium and are defined by their technology and media use and their love of electronic communication and their need to multitask. TPAC. TPAC is teaching for the future. We think of great teachers as those who can bring together deep knowledge of subject matter with a good understanding of what is best for learning. This combination is described as pedagogical content knowledge, PCK. In the 21st century, information and technology, ICT, has provided us with new ways to access and process knowledge. ICT is revolutionising pedagogy by giving us new ways to engage learners. Teachers now bring together knowledge of subject matter what is good for learning and technology, ICT. The combination is described as technological, pedagogical, content, knowledge, TPAC. It is more than simply adding ICT to traditional approaches. It depends upon deep knowledge of ICT and how it can be used to access and process subject matter, TCK, and understand how ICT can support and enhance learning, TPK. Investigating with ICT, the Australian curriculum states with regard to investigating with ICT, this element involves students in using ICT to define and plan information searches of a range of primary and secondary sources when investigating questions, topics or problems. Students use ICT to locate, access, generate, organise and/or analyse data and information and apply criteria to verify the integrity and value of the digital data and information sources. In developing and acting with information and communication technology capability, students must define and plan information searches, locate, generate and access data and information, select and evaluate data and information.
Thanks, Kylie, that was great. I'm going to be talking about communicating with ICT. The focus of communicating with ICT is not simply about communication between two people using ICT. It's about a learner-centred approach that can be both individualised and collaborative. Essentially, communicating through ICT is about building a community. This can be achieved in several ways within the classroom. Firstly, the integration of email, chat avenues, wikis and discussion forums. It is important for educators to support participation in such mediums for students to feel a part of a broader community. ICT communication can also be advantageous for parents of students who are implementing ICT in the classroom. This allows for greater transparency in relation to students' work, what is expected of the students and when the students' work is actually due. Communication between teacher and parent. This is particularly relevant within today's busy lifestyle where parents do not have access to the school compared to previous times. Additionally, it can be used for students to peer review, however, this would need to be monitored closely with strict guidelines. It is fundamental that educators provide opportunities for students to expand on their existing knowledge in relation to online learning. Essentially, students are involved in learning beyond the classroom walls. Of course, it is important to note that educators are responsible for the safety and security of any ICT used within the classroom, and this is something that must be considered when contemplating new ICT forums. School policies must be referred to during the development stage of such ideas. There are three types of learning that need to be considered when discussing ICT and how it can be used in the creation aspect of it. Learning about ICT, this refers to learning the intricate details of how it works, but we can also learn from ICT. This is obvious in that it refers to new details that one can learn from the technology they are using. Learning with the ICT is learning with the technology that it incorporates. It's amazing to think that these three learning aspects can be achieved from ICT without it being explicitly noted. Incorporating creative ICT into lessons is not about teaching students to do old things in new ways. It's about teaching students to do new things in new ways. These are our future generation and it is astounding to think where technology is advancing. If we look at the definition of creating, it refers to bringing something into existence. We want to encourage our students' creativity as much as possible. We know the importance of creating with ICT, but what is it that can be created? We can begin with basic Word documents and end with very complex ideas such as web pages. When designing web pages, this can be incorporated into almost all key learning areas. Students have to research their material online, find images and make it visually appealing, as well as adding voiceovers through various podcast programs, all of which are using both multiple intelligences and Bloom's taxonomy. There are numerous ideas on what strategies can be implemented to manage ICT in the classroom. Schools now predominantly have their own school drive for information to be transferred and monitored. The intranet will be highly maintained and students will have their own school email address, which will be easily accessible to teaching staff. With most schools now operating on a BYOD, bring your own device, or the school is supplying the device, monitoring of the school's intranet is paramount. When it comes to the operating of ICT protocol must be developed and must be made known to the class and ensure complete understanding has occurred. It is important that certain boundaries be put in place and repercussions will occur if these boundaries are overstepped. Despite our advancements of technology, there will always be days when something does not work. It is important to always have a backup plan for all your lessons, particularly if the entire lesson was structured around the use of technology. Additionally, it is important that students are aware of any copyright and intellectual property laws. This needs to be made explicit to the student, and particularly in the higher grades. So, after this information on the ways of ICT today, what is the impact of ICT in the 21st century classroom on teaching and learning? ICT allows for a higher order thinking on behalf of the student. It allows for the development of analysing, evaluating and group work skills, all of which are lifelong lessons that must be enhanced throughout the years of education. The use of ICT not only provides an engaging learning environment, but it also provides an effective one. We want to spark the innovative learning in our students, and this cannot be achieved effectively without the implementation of ICT in our classrooms. We as educators always need to be as up to date with technology as possible. Enhancing our ICT pedagogy is essential within the 21st century classroom. Without it, we are negatively affecting our students' learning progress. Keep up to date with 21st century learning pedagogies and theories. ICT is an important part of our classrooms today.